What's up, NAIA Nation? It's your boy Manny here. Welcome back to the Hoop Report, the NAIA Women's Basketball Podcast, episode number 51. We've made it to the final week of the regular season, y'all. It's crazy to think that we are 17, 18 weeks in. It's been one heck of a ride, a lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of great things that we're going to touch on. A lot of things to touch on this weekend. Pretty jam-packed week of content I have lined up. If everything lines up, schedule and all that kind of stuff is not always going to be in my control or in other people's control. Little hint there. We are going to try and make this a fun final week of the season and then get us right into the postseason that will start next Tuesday. Is the first batch of conference games. Might even be next Monday, but I know for sure next Tuesday will be the first batch of conference games. Pretty interesting episode we have here lined up. We're going to go over our regular season championship race update going into the final week. Obviously, there are a few teams that have already clinched, and if you're going, probably not this point, but at some point throughout this video that you guys are watching, obviously on Monday morning on President's Day, there will have been a few posts already on our socials. Obviously, we already have all the graphics made up, but we're going to kind of wait a little bit for the posting on Monday morning, make sure everything's official, make sure we have all our information correct. Never want to give y'all misinformation on that front. So we're going to talk about that, and they're also going to preview some of the very important games this week. I will say that for the end, because some of the games that I'm not going to mention in that are obvious ones, I'm going to mention in our regular season championship update race. So that's why I'm not going to mention some of those games. For example, Ryan Hart-Milligan in the AAC and Dorton, Dakota Wesson in the GPAC. We're going to talk about those games during the first part of the episode. So we're going to get right into it with some of our teams that have already clinched in their respective conferences. It starts with first LSU Shreveport. LSU Shreveport, round of applause for LSU Shreveport as they have clinched the regular season championship in the Red River. They do have a very important game lined up, and one of the games that will be on our Around the Rim preview of the week. But LSU Shreveport has won the Red River Conference regular season championship. Means that they have punched their ticket to the national tournament no matter what happens in the Red River Conference tournament itself. Now remember, the Red River Conference tournament itself, it is important to note that if LSU Shreveport does end up winning the regular season, the conference championship, then we go to the second highest ranked team in the ARC. So not in the standings, but in the ARC. So something to keep in mind moving forward throughout these next 2 weeks really of conference play finishing up, and then the tournament itself. Obviously, you're looking at some teams like Texas A&M, San Antonio. We're looking at a few other teams that have a good chance of making a conference championship run. But obviously, like I said, LSU Shreveport has clinched. They did it on senior day, beating Xavier. I believe this is going to be number 5 maybe or number 4 in the past 5 years for LSU Shreveport in clinching. I'm reading the article right now. Obviously, it was a great win by the Pilots. It says right there they're 19-1 going into this week, 23-3 overall. Again, Red River regular season champions. It does not mention the last time that they won or how many times this is, but I do know this is multiple times now in the past few years, especially since I've been a part of the NAIA women's basketball. So again, a round of applause for the Pilots on clinching the Red River. Now we're going to go over to KCAC, where the Evangel Valor have ended up clinching the regular season championship, something that I kind of expected literally all year. I don't think there was ever going to be a situation where they didn't. Now, I did also pick them not going perfect. I picked it in the middle of the year, literally right before it happened. For those who don't know, on our KCAC coverage, on our specific coverage with the conference, I said before they lost to Bethel that it felt like that was the game that was going to cause the only loss of the season. So I do think this is the best team in the conference. I do think this is the team to be in the conference, and the team that did it on their senior night. So you love to honor the seniors in that way. So very impressive win against Bethany, a team that I think also does have a very good chance at making a nice little run here in the KCAC. When you look at Coach Maddie Wallace, she said post-game, "I'm especially proud of all of our seniors on their senior day. Today was a great win to elevate us into the last week of the regular season play." Again, very impressive win for the Valor and a wire-to-wire dominant season where they are going to be the number 1 seed. Same exact thing if they are the ones who win the conference championship, which I do believe they are the best odds to do that. the second seed, I believe, is the one that will be going to the national tournament as the second auto bid, not the ARC or not the runner-up or anything like that. It would be the second seed in the conference. So keep an eye on that moving forward. This is a very impressive win for the Valor, and it's also Coach Manny Wallace's first season. Obviously, we had her on the Hoop Report earlier during the Christmas winter break time, and I just knew, we talked about it off air, talked about it on air a little bit, that they were the ones to beat. Very humble coach, very, very much a coach that has earned this one, and I'm glad that her and her team are able to just take in the past couple days now of celebration and understanding how hard what they just did is, and then to get right back to work for the final week. Next team that clinched in the WHAC, Indiana Tech. The Indiana Tech Warriors have clinched in the WHAC. Same old. I talked about it in the preseason with Caleb. The WHAC runs to Indiana Tech. Now, there was some time, Lords, Rochester Christian. I do think they're going to have something to say about it. But in the end, it was Indiana Tech, and I'm not surprised about it. Not wire to wire, but pretty dominant. I think it was probably the most quiet, dominant run for a regular season champion this year, where, like I mentioned, because there were so many other teams that were kind of poking their head up and saying, hey, we have a chance. Hey, we just beat. I remember at the beginning of the year, Rochester Christian beat Indiana Tech at Rochester Christian, I believe it was. I think it was on the road. I think it was at home. So it's very, very plausible. And I thought, hey, there's a world. And even Cleary threw some tough games in there. Obviously, some upset wins for them. But in the end, it does run through Indiana Tech. They have their 5th straight WHAC regular season title, an impressive mark of straight dominance in the WHAC. Again, it runs through Fort Wayne, and I just don't see it changing, honestly. They won on their senior day 86-49. They are now obviously ranked number 24 right now in the country, in the top 25 in the final regular season polls. We'll see what happens in the final polls of the season. But again, Indiana Tech does what they do, what they've been doing for the past 5 years. Another regular season title to their name in the program's history. Next one, from one dominant conference regular season champion to another, the Columbia College Cougars out of the AMC. Congratulations on clinching your conference regular season championship. Very impressive because, you can't talk about dominance without talking about this Columbia College team, obviously. And another perfect segue from one team in Indiana Tech from the WHAC to the Cougars, who are doing what they've been doing for the past 5 years, maybe even longer, if I remember correctly. They are a team that the AMC runs to them, no matter who. We've had some great teams in the AMC this year. UHSP, you obviously have William Baptist, Stevens, even Mission, Central Baptist, a lot of good young teams doing what they do. But at the end of the day, it is just the Cougars. It is the Cougars. They are the bar in the AMC, and they are going to be the bar moving forward throughout the next couple of weeks, and as long as they want to be. Honestly, when you've got players like Lexi Miller, Maya Miller, Ashton Colesmeyer, just to name a few, plus Alexi Rubel. There's just so many players on this team that I can go down the list. But perfect run in the AMC so far. They technically do have a few more games. They have 2 more games left, but they have all but clinched the number 1 seed in the AMC, and therefore have clinched a spot in the national tournament. I believe the AMC is also a regular season conference, same team. I want to say second seed. I'm going to look at my notes here real quick just to make sure. So, yes, they are a tournament. If the tournament and the regular season champion are the same in the AMC, then it is going to be the tournament runner-up. The tournament runner-up will be the one who gets it. So if Columbia College just gets the championship game in the AMC, whoever they are playing will be the team that gets the second auto bid, no matter what happens in that game, win or lose for either side. So that is going to be another team that has clinched their spot in the national tournament. We've talked about the Red River. We've talked about the AMC. We've talked about the WHAC. We've talked about the KCAC. Now we're going to talk about another team that has been dominant, and even though this year they didn't think people thought they weren't going to be dominant, it is Rio Grande. The Red Storm get the River State's first seed in the East, and they get the overall number 1 seed in the conference regular season department. They will be punching their ticket as well, going to the national tournament with Coach David Smalley, and just a great group of ladies that show you it's possible to continue success even when you're having a massive turnover like they did in terms of roster, especially when you have a great established foundation, not just from the players that are coming back, but also from the fact that you have a coaching staff that has won at the highest level for so long, obviously, and I think it's just a very impressive mark, a very hard thing to do. They clinched the River State's East side of things on Thursday, I believe it was, or on Wednesday, when they beat Midway. And then this past Saturday, when they clinched overall stuff, no one's going to be able to touch them. They are a perfect 13-0 going into, I believe even 14-0 going into this week. So very excited to see what the Red Storm can do. Another team, the WHAC runs through Indiana Tech, the AMC runs through Columbia, and the River States runs through Rio Grande. It's just the way that the world is made until further notice. So keep an eye on things there. For the River States side of things, they are that conference that kind of getting still familiar with, but I think I have an understanding about it. It is the second highest vote getting team on the conference scale and or tournament. So still kind of getting some clarification of what exactly that means. But I do believe that basically it could be a situation where if you're the tournament runner-up, I think is what they're trying to say. But I'm not 100% sure. But I do know it is not the second seed. It's not anything like that, because they do have, I believe, the top 4 seeds from each division are the ones that are going to be playing in the conference tournament. So keep an eye on them. Again, Rio Grande, all 3 of the teams I just mentioned are favorites to win their conference, even though they've been the favorites for the past few years. I mean, it's not going to change. Rio Grande and the River States, the Indiana Tech Warriors for the WHAC, and then the Cougars for the AMC. Those are the 3 teams. Those 3 teams, I'm not picking anybody but them in their respective conferences. Not to say there's not good teams in there. Again, for Rio Grande, talking about Midway, talking about Shawnee State, Brescia. A lot of teams in there. AMC talked about a few already, and the WHAC talked about a few already. So I'm not saying that it's going to be impossible, but field or them, I'm taking them in those 3 situations. Now, one team that I did want to highlight, and I haven't been able to confirm this, but looking at the schedules, looking at the standings, kind of going off of my knowledge of basketball, Oakwood, I believe, has clinched in the HBCU. So we're going to give them a round of applause. Again, I saved that for last because I wasn't 100% sure on it. I've been kind of waiting to see if articles are posted, whether on the conference website or on the school website. I haven't seen anything yet. So, but again, going off of exactly just how I know basketball works, they have as of right now, I believe 9-1 record in conference, and the next team closest to them is 8-3 or 8-2 or no 7-3, something like that. Like there's more than a 1-game lead is what I'm trying to say between Oakwood and the next highest team in terms of conference play, and we only have 2 games left. So, well, 2 games ideally. I don't know if they're scheduled off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure they have 2 games left, like most teams do in the country right now, if you don't have any makeup games or anything like that. Technically, the season ends on Saturday, but there are 2 games from the AAC need to get played on Sunday because of makeups and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, we want to get those games in before the conference tournament starts. But, yeah, I believe Oakwood has clinched in the HBCU. Going to try and get confirmation on that. If you see the post on Instagram before this video or anything like that, then they have clinched, and we were able to confirm that. But just something to keep in mind. I didn't want to shine some light on them if that was the case. That's very impressive. I think last year they were maybe 3rd or 4th, maybe even a little bit lower in their division. And then in the standings, they were middle of the pack, obviously, in the tournament side of things. For the HBCU, they are a tournament and regular season champion are the same. They are going to be a tournament runner-up, will be the second auto bid for their conference. So a lot of things to touch on for the HBCU. I mean, I think Oakwood is a very good team to try and get to the conference championship game. I don't know if I would go as far as to pick them just yet. They have been very dominant, obviously, in the HBCU. Now, when we look at I talked about the other 3 field or them. I'm going them. In this situation, I'd go to the field. I mean, you've got a Wiley, you've got a Paul Quinn who've had a really good year, a Rust, a Stillman, Philander Smith. You got a lot of these teams that have been able to throw some different things at Oakwood, been able to get them a little bit off their game. So very excited to see what happens in the HBCU. One of those conferences I'm going to be in tune with from the beginning because they are one of the earlier conferences. They're going to start on Thursday, I believe. So very excited to see what they do. Those are the 6 conferences, 5 for sure, 5.5, 6 maybe, that have clinched going to the final week of the regular season. That leaves the other half about that have not. We're talking about the Frontier, the Southern States, the AAC, the GPAC, the Crossroads, and the Chicagoland, plus the SAC and Hart and Cascade. Good Lord, that Cascade. We're going to save that one for last because, wow. we're going to start kind of going in order. I think for me, I did it in order of the teams that are most likely to clinch to the teams that I have no idea where we're clinching. That's why the Cascade is last, because I have no idea what we're doing there. So when we look at this, the Frontier's up first. I think the Frontier is the most, if you give me a percentage chance, Dakota State is the odds-on favorite. Right now, they're in control, even after they lost this past weekend to Montana Tech in a very nice, very tough game for the Trojans. Even though they lost, they still hold a one-game lead over Montana Tech, who is the second seed. Montana Tech right now 17-4. Trojans are 18-3, I believe, or 16-4. Montana Tech 17-3 are the Trojans. So when you look at this, it's still in their grasp. I would say for percentage chance, I would say 75, maybe even 80% chance that the Trojans are going to be the ones that get the conference championship, regular season championship. Why? They're a favorable matchup, and they need to lose for Montana Tech to even have a chance at it. I believe that Montana Tech has to lose out, which is the last 2 games of their season on Friday and Saturday. They have to lose out on those games for this possibly get into an interesting tiebreaker situation between them, Montana Tech, and even Carroll. If Carroll is tied right now with Montana Tech as well. So that is the world of possibility right now. So 17-3 for the Dakota State. Montana Tech and Carroll are 16-4 apiece. Even Rocky Mountain is not that far, 15-5 now. Rocky Mountain does not have a chance of getting in, but technically they are pretty close to all 3 of these teams that I've mentioned. Now, when you look at Dakota State's final 2 games, the reason I say it's at an 80% chance, I believe they're an odds-on favorite. You've got Dickinson State and you've got Bismarck State both at home. I just don't see them dropping any of those games. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, Dakota State can clinch the conference regular season championship. Again, from my knowledge of the game and from what I've heard, they would be able to clinch on Friday with a win no matter what happens with Montana Tech. The other way that they would clinch is if Montana Tech loses. Well, technically, no. Actually, Dakota State has to win out. I apologize. Dakota State has to win out because since Montana Tech beat them this past weekend, if they drop that last game of the regular season and Montana Tech is able Montana Tech is able to win their games and we have a situation where maybe there's another tiebreaker there, now things are getting a little interesting. They're getting a little interesting here. You have to win out if you are Dakota State because you only have a 1-game lead, meaning if you lose on Friday or even if you lose on Saturday, you are now going to have the same number of losses with Montana Tech if Montana Tech wins out. Montana Tech has to win out for them to have a chance to force a tiebreaker, and then we go on through all their situations in the conference. If Dakota State wins out, then they can do that. What I meant was if Montana Tech loses on Friday and Dakota State wins, that will clinch it for the Trojans. So the Trojans can only clinch on the final day of the regular season on the 21st. And then if that is barring no loss by Montana Tech. If Montana Tech wins out and Dakota State drops one of their last 2 games, then we're looking at a much more interesting kind of breakdown of things. That also throws in Carroll. If Carroll wins out, then they're also going to be thrown in the mix there. So a lot of things are going to be interesting on the final day of the regular season in the Frontier if those things do happen. Now, the reason I feel like it's 80% chance going to Dakota State for Montana Tech, they're at MSU Northern and at Providence. I don't know if you can have a tougher 2 games back-to-back, obviously, because they're going to be playing on Friday and Saturday. So we'll see. I do think they can go 2-0, and I think they're the favorites to go 2-0 in that run, but that's still a very tough test, and especially, again, on the road. Not even one, but both on the road is going to be a tough one. And then for Carroll, same thing. They're going to be on the road. Now, more favorable matchups. They'll be at Valley City and at Mayville State. I think they can go 2-0 there as well. So we're even looking at maybe there's a world where Carroll jumps Montana Tech, and now we're looking at Montana Tech being the number 3 seed and Carroll being the number 2 seed. So we will see how it all plays out. But I do believe from a regular season championship standpoint, it will be Dakota State with an 80 to 85% chance even of winning and clinching their spot in the national tournament. Now, Southern States. In the Southern States, Loyola, it's theirs to lose. It's theirs to lose. They'll clinch. Simply put, they will clinch after having a 1-game lead going into this week. They will clinch with a win on Thursday, I believe they play against Blue Mountain Christian. There's only 2 games left. 2 games left. The next highest team in the Southern States is William Carey, who is right now 12-3, and Loyola is 13-2. So all that means is that, and remember, Loyola did have a situation where they beat William Carey William Carey has a very tough slate against UT Southern coming up this weekend early on Thursday. So there's a world where if William Carey loses that, it's clinched for Loyola. I'm pretty sure Loyola would clinch with their next game, with their next win, going off of just, again, math. You have a 2-game lead over actually only have 1-game lead. So no, you have to go to the end of the season for this one because they're 13-2 and William Carey is 12-3. So in the reality, you got to win out if you're Loyola. You got to win out, barring, similar to Frontier, barring a William Carey loss, you have to win out for the last 2 days of the regular season, and you would clinch on that final day of the regular season. If you lose and William Carey wins out, now we're going to force a tiebreaker situation. We'll see what happens there. William Carey, the fourth tiebreaker, has to win out and hope Loyola loses at least 1 game. Loyola clinches with winning out the rest of the regular season in the Southern States. It's pretty much that simple. UT Southern is on the map. Now, the problem with UT Southern is they are 11-3 and they have William Carey. So one of those 2 teams will be knocked out of contention for the number 1 seed once Thursday comes and goes. We'll see which one. Now, if I'm Loyola, I would want to William Carey to get knocked out because they're the only one out of these 2 teams that has beaten them. I do not believe UT Southern has beaten Loyola. I'm going to double check myself here real quick on the standings for the season. No, they did not beat them on the 6th of December, and they have them lined up on the final day of the regular season. So if I'm Loyola, UT Southern, by the way, has a crazy end of the season in the Southern States. Crazy when you got William Carey and Loyola on your schedule. Wild. But if I'm Loyola, I would rather UT Southern win against William Carey first. So now it sets up a semi-winner-take-all type of situation because even though if Loyola loses that last day of the regular season to UT Southern in this scenario, they're not out of contention. They probably still might get it because of breakdowns and whatnot. As a matter of fact, they would get it because, and this kind of goes, I'm assuming for every conference, and that's kind of how I've been going with these tiebreakers. Most conferences, again, pretty much all I'm confident in saying, go off head-to-head, obviously, is your first one. If you don't have that, then you go off conference record against your opponents. So basically what I mean is, how did you do in terms of standings? How did you do against each individual team in the conference? So obviously, your conference record is how you did in the conference as a whole. But now when we look at individual records, that's how that next tiebreaker typically goes. And what I mean by that is using the Southern States as an example. And this could go for the Frontier and all these other conferences that we're going to get into. But using the Southern States as an example, let's say in this scenario, like I mentioned, UT Southern beats William Carey. So now UT Southern is the 2nd seed. They have a chance. They then beat Loyola on the final day of the regular season, who after Loyola won their game against Blue Mountain Christian on Thursday. All right, so now you forced a tiebreak situation between Loyola and UT Southern. Now, because both teams have a win over each other, we go to that following tiebreaker, which is record against common opponents, or conference record is what I call it. Basically, you go in order of the standings, and you see how each team did individually with those opponents. So, in terms of the standings, the next team up will be William Carey. William Carey beat UT Southern twice. Hold, please, because something around that does not feel right. I don't know if it's a gut feeling. I know Loyola did beat William Carey once, right? So for us to move on to the next team, which will be Faulkner, UT Southern would have to beat William Carey at least once. And obviously they play, which, yeah, in this scenario, that would have been the situation. But they didn't beat them the first time, that's what I was thinking about. If UT Southern wins on Thursday against William Carey, you help yourself for the tiebreaker because now you go to Faulkner. And you keep going all the way down until one team had a better record than that opponent against that opponent than the other team. That makes sense. So, and I'm not going to say that is a situation, but so I don't go down all the whole standings. Both teams have a win over William Carey and a loss to William Carey. Faulkner, if let's say UT Southern beat Faulkner 2 times in the season and Loyola only beat them once, now that means that UT Southern had a better record against Faulkner. They won that tiebreaker. They would get the number 1 seed and Loyola would get the number 2 seed. That's basically what I'm trying to say. It can go down, and I've seen it happen where you go down and you have the same exact record against everybody in the conference. It's happened. It's happened, y'all. So now after that, you got me there. I don't know what the next tiebreaker is. Some conferences, I don't know, it might be a coin flip. I don't know. But I know that is typically the next level of tiebreakers in these conferences. So we'll see how it goes. Southern State is going to go down to the final day of the season. Love those. Not the only conference, by the way, that's doing that. But I do think in a percentage standpoint, Loyola wins out. If you control your own destiny, where all you have to do is win to get it, I think you have at least above 70% chance. So I'm going to give them 75% because they do have a very tough schedule lined up here. And it kind of also depends from what UT Southern does on Thursday. If William Carey wins, I think that actually bumps Loyola's chances up. But if UT Southern wins, now we're getting a little interesting here. So I'd say 75% chance that it's Loyola when it's all said and done. Now moving over to the AAC. It's Eagles and Buffs, y'all. Eagles and Buffs. Reinhardt and Milligan. Reinhardt has control of the number 1 seed right now in the AAC. They are 16-1 going into the week. Milligan is 15-1 going into the week. The crazy part about this is they play each other today. When you guys are watching this on Monday, they will be lined up to play for a very interesting game where if Reinhardt wins, they'll move to 17-1. That drops Milligan down to 15-2. And now we're looking at them more concerned about Brian than more concerned about Reinhardt, if we're being honest here. If Reinhardt wins, they will clinch the AAC after their following win. Again, doing math, a lot of numbers this past couple of days. But if my math is correct, Reinhardt right now technically has a half-game lead over Milligan because Milligan has a makeup game. Like I mentioned, they play on Sunday. One of the only 4 teams, I guess, that play on Sunday. So if they beat Milligan, they will now have a 1-game lead over the Buffs. If they win their following game on Wednesday against Brenau, they will then continue that 1-game lead, and that would mean that going into Saturday, even if they lose, they already have the tiebreaker against Reinhardt, so therefore we're looking at Anna against Brian. So that means that they would clinch after the Wednesday game no matter what happens on Saturday. So if Reinhardt wins on Monday today, I am very confident saying they would be able to clinch on Wednesday following their win if there was to be the case at Brenau. Now, mind you, Reinhardt does have the last 3 games of the regular season on the road, so anything can happen on the road. Play Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. Milligan, Brenau, Bluefield. You never know what could happen on any given day in the NAIA. So we'll see how it goes, but there is a world where Reinhardt clinches on Wednesday if they win these next 2 games. Now, if the Buffs win, they would clinch on Saturday. I'm pretty sure that they would have to wait until the final day of the regular season just to see how things play out because, and technically it wouldn't be Saturday. Oh, yeah, it would be Saturday because, remember, they play on Sunday, so things are going to get pushed back. So if both teams had the same number of games, I think both teams will be able to clinch on Wednesday, whoever won after the Monday game. But because Milligan has a game back to make up on Sunday, they would have to clinch on the final day of the regular season. Basically, whoever wins on Monday, I would give them an 80% chance of, maybe even 85% chance of clinching the AAC. We'll see what shakes out. Right now, I do go Reinhardt. I think Reinhardt's been the best team in the AAC. They did not start like that, but they are finishing like that right now. So I do think Reinhardt has the advantage. Even though the game is at Milligan, it is going to be a very interesting game nonetheless. We've talked about a few teams. Now we're going to go over to the GPAC side of things. GPAC's an interesting one, y'all. Dort's 1 win away after Dakota Wesleyan lost this past weekend to Mount Marty. It was not a game that I expected to go the way it did, but hey, this is why we play NAIA ball. You never know what can happen on any given day. With that being said, though, Dakota Wesleyan's not out of it. What saves them is the fact that they have Dort literally this week on Wednesday. If the Tigers beat Dort, then technically they have a chance, but they would need Waldorf to then beat Dort, which I don't see that happening. But the GPAC's been a crazy, crazy ride all year. If Dort wins on Wednesday, they will clinch the GPAC regular season championship, and they will have punched the ticket to the national tournament, and their three-peat hopes are still alive for the defenders on the national scene. It all comes down to Wednesday, though. If Dort wins, and I have them winning, to be honest with y'all, they will be able to come out with another GPAC title under their belt. If the Tigers win, technically there is a world where if Waldorf wins on the final day of the regular season against Dort, then that would force a tiebreaker between Dort and the Tigers, and we'll go down the same rabbit hole. Even so, I do believe the tiebreakers are going to favor the Dort because Dakota Wesleyan already has 4 losses on the season. Dort only has 1, and that was to Don. So for us to get to Don, you'd have to have a better record against everybody else, and Dakota Wesleyan just doesn't have that. So it really is Dort's to lose right now, and even if they lose out, if they lose out, they have a better and they have a worse record. That's a little different story. But I don't think, even still, I just said if the Tigers beat Dort and Waldorf beats them, they'll have 3 losses just like Dakota Wesleyan will, assuming they don't lose anymore. Tiebreakers. So it really is Dort's. Come Wednesday, they technically will have clinched with a win. And even if they don't, I think it's just a matter of time at that point. That was a GPAC. Now the Crossroads. Marion's back in front, y'all. For the first half of the year, for the first third, it was all Marion. For the second and third quarters of the season, it was St. Francis. But now for this last quarter, it's all Marion now. It's Marion in the driver's seat. After Marion beat St. Francis this past weekend, they now have the number 1 seed with a 1 game. Therefore, if they win on Wednesday, they will clinch the regular season crown as well. Again, just going off of the math and going off things like that. Marion wins on Wednesday. They cannot catch St. Francis. And if they were to catch St. Francis on a tiebreaker situation, I'm pretty sure, because if Marion does lose on Wednesday, now we're in a little bit of a different world. Obviously, back to tiebreakers. Everything comes down to, if you win on Wednesday, most of these games you guys can see, because it's the final day of the regular season, if the clinching team or the team that can clinch doesn't clinch on Wednesday, you're probably opening up tiebreaker world now on Saturday. And I'm not saying that it's guaranteed no matter win or loss, but if you lose on Wednesday, don't be surprised if Saturday is more about, hey, how does this team do? How does that team do? Marion is in control. They should be able to clinch with a win on Wednesday. We will see. Now, if they lose and St. Francis wins, now things get interesting on that final day. We're going to have kind of a tiebreak situation again, like I mentioned multiple times already for some of these other conferences when we've talked about if this happens or if that happens. So keep an eye on the Crossroads, especially on Wednesday. If Marion wins, I believe they have Indiana Wesleyan. I believe it's at Marion, though. Now, if it's at Indiana Wesleyan, that'll be very interesting. I think it might be, actually. It's going to be a good game. And again, the Wildcats are red hot right now, so we'll see what Wildcat team comes to play. But if it's the Wildcat team that we've been seeing the past couple weeks, Marion's going to be in for a dogfight. They're going to be in for a dogfight. The Chicagoland, Allegiant Nazarene, I believe, is 1 game away. They should clinch with the win on Wednesday because they hold a 1-game lead over St. Francis of Illinois. And Allegiant Nazarene's last game of the season is technically against Trinity College, who obviously did not play this season, so that's a forfeit win. So they already have their season in Allegiant Nazarene regular season will end on Wednesday because they won't play on Saturday. And therefore, all you need to do is win. You win that game, you have a better record than St. Francis, you're done. No matter what happens with St. Francis, if they win the next 2 games or not, you have a better record. So for the Allegiant Nazarene Tigers, you are 1 game away, 40 minutes away from clinching the Chicagoland, according to my math, according to my numbers. Got 3 conferences left. I think the 3 most interesting conferences in terms of final week races. First up, it's a 2-line race in the SAC, y'all. 2-line race because Nelson and Langston are in a tight race to the finish. It is going to be by claws, by hairs, by fur, all of it. This is because both Nelson and Langston lost this past weekend. If one of those teams had won, now we're looking at things being a little bit different and that team being in control. Because both teams lost, Nelson lost to USAO and Langston lost to John Brown. Very great games for both the Drovers and the Golden Eagles. We see things now change, but not really. Basically, we're still where we were at before this past weekend, where it was a nip and tuck game. We're looking at things to be very interesting. So things are still the same because both teams did lose. If Langston wins the season finale matchup, they win the crown. In case I didn't mention, because I know I've mentioned it before, but in case y'all didn't know, Langston and Nelson are playing on the final day of the regular season. Therefore, we are going to have an impromptu regular season championship game on the final day of the regular season in the SAC. Langston and Nelson will be facing off for that. If Nelson wins that game, now this all bars, I know I'm skipping the Saturday, but this all hinges on the fact that both teams would have to win during the week to get there. If one of these teams loses, I'm almost confident in saying, well, it doesn't even matter because even if one of those teams loses, you're still looking at that final day to make up that game. So it really does come down to the final day of the regular season. When we look at the standings for the SAC, 17-3 for Langston, 16-4 for Nelson. So let's say Nelson loses beforehand. No, yeah, Nelson has to win. So Nelson's the one team. Langston has that 1-game lead, so they have a little bit of margin of error, basically, to where if they lose during the week, but then beat Nelson on the final day of the regular season, they will be fine. But when you look at Nelson, they're 16-4. If they lose during the week, even if you win that last day of the regular season, you're still 1 game behind Langston. So Nelson needs to win. This all hinges on Nelson winning. If Nelson doesn't win during the week, it's going to be Langston that clinches the regular season title. If Nelson wins that game on the final day of the regular season and it forces a tiebreak situation, we're looking at, again, like I mentioned, the breakdowns of everything. Now, season series, team splits. This is one of those ones that I do want to get into because it kind of goes a little farther down. we look at the standings, and if they finish the way they are right now, which I haven't even looked at the rest of it. Only update to this is the fact that Wayland Baptist has now clinched a spot in the SAC. Everything else, because standings might change, but they'll be in. If these are the standings that will be for the conference tournament, it'll be Langston and Nelson 1 and 2, however order that it goes out into, and it's a tiebreaker. MACU, College of the Ozarks, USAO, Wayland Baptist, and then we're still fighting for that last spot between John Brown and Southwestern Christian. Even Texas Western's down there at the bottom. If this goes that way, both teams split against MACU, but Langston beat College of the Ozarks while Nelson split with them, so Langston will get the number 1 seed. Basically saying, if you're a Nelson fan, you need to win out, force a tiebreaker situation, and you need College of the Ozarks to somehow drop in the standings. If you look at their schedule for College of the Ozarks, it's not crazy, but kind of. I mean, you've got Oklahoma City. If you're College of the Ozarks, I see them winning that game. Southwestern Christian is playing for their playoff livelihood right now. So depending on what happens in their game against John Brown, could be an interesting game there, but it's tough. I just don't see College of the Ozarks dropping. I just don't see them dropping. So Langston right now has a very, very good chance. I would say 75% chance of getting to have another conference regular season championship under their belt. Now, we talked about their game in the middle of the week is in Texas Wesleyan. I don't see Texas Wesleyan pulling off an upset. Now, if they do, that's the other thing. If you're a Nelson fan, you're rooting for Texas Wesleyan because if Texas Wesleyan wins, it basically means forget tiebreakers. Whoever wins the last year's regular season will win the SAC regular season title. If you're a Nelson fan, you're also hoping that College of the Ozarks drops in the standings somewhere. Even if it's one spot, you give yourself a better chance. But from what I went through, College of the Ozarks would be that team that causes Nelson to not be regular season champions and goes to Langston. If you're Langston, just win. That's why to me they have the better odds. All you got to do is win out. You win out, you're good to go, you're golden. So we'll see what happens in the SAC, one of the more interesting races going down to the final day of the regular season. Last two. Hart. It's a 3-way tie for first, y'all. 3-way tie. So buckle in. It's a little bit of a doozy. So Mid-American Nazarene and Benedictine are tied while Grandview is a half game behind both teams. If all three teams head into the final day of the regular season with the same losses, so the same record pretty much, Grandview would be eliminated because from first seed contention, I believe they will not be able to, they will have a worse record, obviously, by losses. They'll be a half game back for both those teams above them. The other part of this is important I combine Mid-American Nazarene and Benedictine. Mid-American Nazarene and Benedictine will meet for the second time of the season on the final day of the regular season. So another situation where we're going to probably have a regular season championship match in the heart against Mid-American Nazarene and Benedictine. Benedictine did win the first one, which makes things all very interesting. Now, the real interesting part about this is we talked about, for Nelson, for example, or Nelson and Langston, and who was the other team that could have a final day regular season matchup? Looking at the Southern States, possibly. You're looking at these teams. Most of the times when you have that matchup for the final day of the regular season, it means that if you win, you get the first seed. If you lose, you get the second seed. And Southern States, it could be it's leaning towards that way, but it could be the other way where maybe they lose against the third seed. We'll see. But for the Heart specifically, if you lose, you're probably looking at the third seed because when you look at it, the winner will obviously get the first seed. But when I went through and did a little extra deep dive, remember, Grandview is only a half game back from both these teams. So if they lose, they'll be tied in the loss column with Grandview. So now you got to look at, tiebreakers like we've talked about. And if the loser is Mid-American Nazarene, they'll drop to third because they lost to Grandview in the season. And it was only one game. They didn't play again, looking at this when I looked at the schedule. If the loser is Benedictine, Grandview stays at third after losing to Benedictine in the in-season matchup. But again, this also all depends on Grandview not losing again. So if you're Mid-American Nazarene, you lose, you might drop to third. You go from first to third. If you're Benedictine, you're guaranteed a top 2 seed as long as you win out into that final day of the regular season. So things are going to get very interesting. And again, this all depends on neither one of these three teams losing before them. If Grandview loses again, they'll probably stay at the third spot no matter what. Benedictine loses, now you're looking at possibly a second seed. It's a whole another world. But this is what we're talking about regular season championships. So this is the breakdown for it in the heart. The last conference in the NAIA. And it might be the craziest conference I've ever seen in my life, y'all. I need y'all to understand this. Because the Cascade right now, generational stuff. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it right now. I need to find out who the script writers are in the Cascade. I need to find out, because what I know, like, firefighters don't like them because they were setting whatever building they were in when they were writing this script at the beginning of the year on a blaze. Absolute fire. We are going to the final week of the regular season. These are the standings in the Cascade. And I'm going to go from bottom up, just to add suspense. Evergreen, last in the conference, 1-17. Tied with Walla Walla, 1-17. Bushnell Northwest, 4-14. Warner Pacific, 6-12. You've got College of Idaho, 13-5. Okay. The next 5 teams all have the same record, 14-4. Oregon Tech, Southern Oregon, Lewis and Clark State, Corbin, and Eastern Oregon. I need anybody, to tell me when the last time, at any level, was this a thing? You're going to the final day of the regular season, the final week of the regular season, I should say, because obviously it cannot be like this on the final day. But you're going to the final week, and from a percentage standpoint, from a probability standpoint, 5 teams can win the conference regular season title? Since when is that a thing? How is that possible? What are the odds of that happening? It's absolutely crazy. I'm at a loss for words. Don't know what to do. I just don't know. I don't know. So when I was looking at this, I said, how on God's beautiful green earth am I supposed to break this down? So I looked at the schedules, obviously. I thought it was going to be one of the Oregons going into the week because Eastern Oregon and Southern Oregon had separated themselves by a half game from everybody else because they were winning some very, very big games. They didn't lose this past. They then lose this past weekend. So now we're back to square one. 5 teams tied for the number 1. The only team that fell out of the race was College of Idaho because there were 6 teams last week. So we lost 1, but it didn't really matter. This is, again, script writers know what y'all doing. The icing on the cake, the caveat, the whipped cream on top of this ice cream, of the cake, the cherry on top, whatever dessert y'all want. These are the matchups lined up for this week. Lewis and Clark State versus Corbin, Southern Oregon versus Eastern Oregon, Southern Oregon versus College of Idaho, Oregon Tech versus Eastern Oregon. So these teams are going to play each other. It's not even like we're talking about these teams now playing the 5 teams that are out of the conference tournament. No. We are going to be seeing head-to-head matchups with these teams. So it's hard for me to really, because Lewis and Clark State plays Corbin. That's really the biggest game for those two. You know, I think that knocks them out because, and the only reason being, even though Corbin and Lewis and Clark State, from a website standpoint, are 2 and 3 in the standings in the website standpoint, because you don't play against any of these other teams, you're not going to be able to get tiebreaker head-to-heads against them. So it has to bump you down. So you're going to go from 2 and 3 probably down to, 3, 4, 5 or 4. College of Idaho, same thing. You're only playing Southern Oregon. Now you can impact things. If you beat Southern Oregon, that'll drop them down. Maybe bumps you up a little bit. So still a very important game for College of Idaho. That leaves Southern Oregon, Eastern Oregon, Oregon Tech. Same thing for Oregon Tech. Oregon Tech only plays Eastern Oregon. So even if they win that game, that's one out of the other 4 teams, or one of the other 4 teams that they play against. 3 teams not counting Eastern Oregon. So it doesn't really help you moving up. And again, I could be completely wrong in this. I could be saying this and everybody's like, no, that doesn't. From what it seems, it feels like the two teams that are still in control of this are the two Oregon teams, Eastern Oregon, Southern Oregon, 2 of the 3, because I know Oregon Tech. So Eastern Oregon, Southern Oregon, I do believe still have the best chance of getting a number 1 seed in the Cascade. The reason being, Southern Oregon plays College of Idaho, like I mentioned. Eastern Oregon plays Oregon Tech, like I mentioned. But they also play each other, Southern Oregon and Eastern Oregon. So in a full broad sense, and I'm going to pull up the schedule to end the Cascade so that I can go literally blow for blow with it, right? So when we look at this for the Cascade, the schedule goes as followed. For women's basketball, got to go to the women's basketball side. Again, this is the full website. And I don't know. I knew the Cascade was going to be one of my favorite conferences to cover this year, but it might be the best conference from a storyline perspective. I think the Cascade is one of the best conferences in the country. I don't think it's number 1, Mid-South, Crossroads, a lot of teams in that argument. I think they're top 4. I mean, the team I would really maybe is GPAC, Frontier on the bubble, but this year, the Cascade's been the best one to follow, absolutely. So, when we look at the schedule for the final week of the regular season, there are four days to play. 4 days to play. Northwestern Evergreen on Tuesday, Evergreen Warner Pacific on Thursday. Friday, Corbin has Lewis and Clark State, like I mentioned, and then they also have Walla Walla. So, let's say if Corbin goes 1-2 and they lose to Lewis and Clark State. All right, cool. So now that means that Lewis and Clark State has dropped Corbin down a peg. All right, I have the standings pulled up here. So that means Corbin goes from 14-4 to 15-5. Okay. Now you go over to Lewis and Clark State. They beat Corbin and they beat Bushnell. So they win 2. They win 2. Obviously, one of those 2 teams has to win both games. So you're looking at this. They could also lose both games, but I don't see that happening. That means Lewis and Clark State now goes from 14-4 to 16-4. Okay, Lewis and Clark State in the mix here. You got to go ahead. You got to go down all the way. Now we got Oregon Tech. Oregon Tech versus College of Idaho. I'm going to take Oregon Tech in that one. So Oregon Tech beats College of Idaho, and then they have Eastern Oregon. I'm taking Eastern Oregon there. So now Oregon Tech can only go 1-1. That drops you down. You go now to 15-5. So you are out of contention for the number 1 seed. Lewis and Clark State still at 16-4. They are the number 1 seed as it stands right now in this imaginary world. For College of Idaho, they're already out of contention because if they win both games, they have the loss. So they're out of contention. Southern Oregon, Eastern Oregon. Let's say Eastern Oregon wins that game, and then they beat Oregon Tech, right? So they're now 2-0. So now they're 16-4, tied with Lewis and Clark State. All right, now sticking with me, right? Southern Oregon, who has now lost to Eastern Oregon, and I believe would beat College of Idaho. They're 1-1. They go to 15-5. They're out of contention. So right now, as it stands in this imaginary world that I'm making up and just deciding things on the fly, Eastern Oregon and Lewis and Clark State are the final 2 teams standing. 16-4 apiece. Now we go to head-to-head for Eastern Oregon. When they played against Lewis and Clark State, I am 90% sure they won 1 game. I can't remember that second game. The second game is one that's kind of confusing me here. So last time they played Lewis and Clark State, they lost. The first time they played Lewis and Clark State, they won. What we talked about before, we now go down the standings and go through in order. The problem is, this is the crazy part. Remember how I said the other teams are now 15-5? Well, I can't go down the rest of the list because now we got to talk about their head-to-head matchup. So even though we're talking about the regular season title, the 2 through 4, 5, maybe even 6 are going to be absolutely ridiculous to try and break down. But what I wanted to show you guys is, in that scenario, it'd be Lewis and Clark State and Eastern Oregon. There's a scenario where it's maybe Southern Oregon and Lewis and Clark State. Maybe there's a scenario where it's Corbin and Southern. Like, there's still so many. There's an endless number of possibilities, but that's just one out of them. And I think that's the one that's most likely. Again, I didn't deep down into the numbers against these teams, nothing like that. I just feel like, A, Eastern Oregon has to be the favorite. They've been the best team all year in the Cascade. I don't see that changing. B, someone has to win, someone has to lose, and Lewis and Clark State just happen to be that team. We'll see if that's the case. I think that'll be very interesting for Lewis and Clark State. Didn't have the best start of the season, but you're possibly still in the running to be at least the number 2 seed in the Cascade. Love that for you. Love that for you. So there's a lot to deep dive into. in the Cascade. I'm going to be glued to these outcomes, especially starting on the first game will be on Friday with Corbin, Lewis, and Clark State. That's 5 p.m. Pacific. Oregon Tech, College of Idaho, 5:30 Mountain Time, and then Southern Oregon, Eastern Oregon, 5:30 Mountain Pacific Time. I don't know, like, it's crazy, y'all. This is gonna be so much fun. Cascade is one of the best conference to cover this year in women's basketball, hands down, not a question about it. And they have to get a lot of teams in that tournament, which I'm not gonna get ahead of myself. I mentioned we're going to have an episode lined up here. The next 2 episodes, ideally, that I will be a part of, again, a little bit of a hint, but the next 2 episodes are going to be at-large bids per conference, kind of seeing, hey, how many teams can the Cascade get in? How many teams can this team get in? Stuff like that. And then the following one, I might flip it, because the following one was going to be every conference tournament champion's Cinderella team. But obviously, I think that'll be a little more important to do at the beginning of the week, since conference tournaments start on Tuesday, and then we can save that at-large number per conference at the end of next week, when really conference championships are just starting. The selection show is March 5th, and that is obviously not next week. That would be the following Thursday. So I think it lines up pretty well, because now on Monday we'll be able to talk about a few things from a standpoint of what happened, who's won, who didn't, all those type of things. And then obviously our fourth bracket, right? No, our third bracket will be coming out very soon. I know I wanted to do 4. I do still want to do 4, but looking at the schedule, that would mean that I have to have the third one out before conference tournaments start, which I think I can do that, actually. Yeah, I could do that. So we're plan on having one coming up very soon in the next couple days here, and then one right before the selection show. So before that Thursday, maybe Thursday, like might be the day of the selection show. But that's the plan. If not, you'll have one for sure guaranteed before Thursday. I'll see if I have time to be able to put together a second one. But that is going to do it for our regular season side of things. A lot to deep dive into. Obviously, that the Cascade one is going to take a while. Before we go, I do want to talk about some of the games that are under the radar, that not conference regular season championship level attention, but very, very much an important side of everything for our around the rim. So the entire, and I say entire, I do mean entire Crossroads. Almost every game this week in the Crossroads will be a playoff preview. These are all playoff preview games in the final week of the season. For the WHAC, you also have Lourdes versus University of Northwestern Ohio. Possible second-round matchup in that one. For the Red River, a Red River Conference preview, I believe, the LSU Shreveport Pilots versus the Texas A&M San Antonio Jaguars. Up to the right there, on the right side, winner gets the 8th seed in the SAC. John Brown versus Southwestern Christian, and that's a little more generalized. There is technically one more day, so we'll see what happens. But in theory, the winner of that game will have the control of the 8th seed. We'll say that right now. John Brown does have a 1-game lead over Southwestern Christian. The exact record for these teams are: John Brown is 19-11, and Southwestern is 8-12. So 1-game lead over for the Golden Eagles, so they have that lead. I think they win, they get it. If Southwestern Christian wins, now we're looking at a very interesting fight to the final day of the season. In the GPAC semifinal preview, the Masters will take on Benedictine Mesa, and then in the Southern States, a semifinal preview, UT Southern takes on William Carey in a very big matchup. I talked a little bit about that one during the episode, during the actual breakdown of everything. So a lot to get into, a lot to deep dive going into this week. A lot of games lined up. Make sure you guys check it out. Final week of the regular season, and so much is still left to be unanswered. That's why we love the NAIA. That's why we love it. That's why we watch it. That's why I cover it. That's why it needed the light that it's been given this year on all fronts. And I do want to take this time to kind of shout out all the platforms that have been covering NAIA hoops, NAIA sports, not just basketball, not just women's basketball, but obviously you got Junior on the men's side with NAIA Hoops Report. You got my good man Reagan, NAISB. You got NAIA ball, NAIA football. Almost every NAIA volleyball, men's volleyball with Dan, like almost every major sport, and the ones that don't have it yet, it's coming. You can feel it. So definitely wanted to give like to all the ones that came before me, all the ones that are coming in the next couple years, because I know that they are very excited to be able to join such a exclusive and such a prestigious platform and such a prestigious club. It's been a lot of fun. Playoffs are right around the corner, and I know it's only going to get better, especially when you've got conferences like the Cascade. I still can't get over that, y'all. Can you believe that? 5 teams that have a chance at the number 1 seed. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Report. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll catch y'all later. Peace.